live. How we doing, everybody? It's your guy Wardy here, and we're back at it with our latest Mets pregame show. A pregame show that we have not done in a hot minute here on the WardyNYM platform. But folks, when Jacob deGrom returns to Citi Field for the first time since fall 2022, it's going to warrant the discussion. Everybody, I want to know, how are you feeling heading into this Friday night matchup? A blackout night there at Citi Field where Jonah Tong, the Mets' young coveted phenom, toes the rubber for his third career start, and no better way for him to toe the rubber now for his third career start than to do it against the former ace of this Mets team in more ways than one in Jacob deGrom, who has not been with the Mets, obviously. We're at Citi Field since October of 2022. Fast forward a month and a half or so later, he signed that multi-year deal with the Texas Rangers at $185 million. We saw aspects of that deal to get it all the way up to, I believe, 225 or so. deGrom is having his best season in a hot minute with a sub-3 ERA, and he's looking to dominate like he has done all season long, this time against his former club, now foe, and the New York Mets. As a Mets fan, I gotta tell you, this feels bizarre. It really does. And I think when we first see deGrom towing the rubber and they play simple man, not only is it going to bring chills, but it's just going to bring a whole whirlwind of emotions as a Mets fan like myself, and probably to many of you guys watching this live on a replay right now, because Jacob deGrom is a guy that obviously paved the way to be a great example as the most dominant pitcher in baseball in many facets, not just in one particular statistic. He was just utterly dominant every single time out there. And to see this Mets team scuffling to the degree that they have now, not just over the past week, more like the past 3 months, I'm shaking my boots a little bit heading into this matchup, I'm not going to lie, but I'm hoping it's a good one. I'm hoping it's an entertaining one, as entertainment in Mets baseball simply have not existed over the past calendar week, as they have lost 6 consecutive ball games after being curb stomped there in Philadelphia this past day, losing every single 4 games that we saw there in Philadelphia against those Phillies. The Mets are now 11 games behind the Phillies, at least for first place, and they are just 1.5 games up for the final wild card spot there over teams like the Reds and the Giants, and to a different degree, the Arizona Diamondbacks and St. Louis Cardinals, even though they're a little bit farther behind. So we have a lot to get into in this one, everybody, but I'm going to first start off by saying it. Thank you so much for hitting that like and subscribe on your way, and I greatly appreciate that. Do not hold back from telling me everything that you're feeling, emotion-wise, excitement-wise, pessimism-wise, heading into this Game 1 matchup for what is the final homestand for the Mets this season, as they begin a 9-game gauntlet starting tonight against the Texas Rangers team that has played polar opposite to the Mets over the past 3 calendar months. The Mets, since June 12th, June 13th or so, have been around 13, 14, 15 games below 500, in that range, the 4th worst record in Major League Baseball. The Texas Rangers have been 10 games above 500 over the past 3 months totaled. So the Rangers have been playing more consistent baseball. The Mets most certainly haven't, and this could either be a recipe for disaster for this club as they continue to get the final nails in the coffin, potentially not even making playoffs this season, or this could be the start of something special for them down the stretch when they need it most here, with just a couple weeks to spare here throughout the course of the 162. And as we all said as well, Jacob deGrom towing the rubber for the first time since October of 2022. It's insane knowing that this is the first time he's been back here in 3 years already. I can't believe it's been that long ago. And secondly, it's a Mets blackout night. Here we go. We have the deGrom black jersey right here, right now, but there's nothing I can do with it. It's kind of a bittersweet thing holding this, looking at this, because I received this in the 2021 offseason, heading into 2022, as a matter of fact. And Jake obviously had a brilliant year for the Mets when he was healthy and optional for them, going back to when he returned in the summer and had that huge series over the Atlanta Braves, to then having some key starts down the stretch and looking solid in the Mets' one and only playoff one there against the San Diego Padres. This jersey, I got to toss it aside. I can't worry about it tonight, but it's kind of crazy knowing that it's been that long now since I've went out of my way to rock that on a Friday night like this, where deGrom's towing the rubber on a Friday night at Citi Field, but he's doing it for the Texas Rangers this time around. Let's get to some comments here. Let's get a breaking down the laps and everything that you guys need to know about this matchup. And again, thank you guys kindly for being in here. I really appreciate that. Looks Let's see. Andre says, this Rangers lineup looks like butt, but I know they will kill us. I mean, every team's been killing this Mets team. The only thing that is in the Mets' favor is that one, Jonathan is towing the rubber tonight. You love the fact that Tong is the guy towing the rubber. I love the fact that Tong is towing the rubber. You're talking about past, present, and future. Look no further than tonight's starting pitching matchup between Jacob deGrom and his sub-3 ERA and his just over 3 expected ERA, facing Jonathan, who's coming off of his worst start of the entire year, and any level, giving up 3 home runs there, the first time that he's given up more than 1 home run in a game, because Tong hadn't allowed more than 2 home runs all season long playing in AA and AAA leading up to his call, yet he gave up 3 bombs on 3 hits that we saw for 4 total earned runs in 6 innings against the Reds there in that batter's box. And Tong held it down, gave the Mets some quality innings, even when he didn't have his best stuff per se. And now it'll be interesting to see how he fares at home for a Mets team at Citi Field that has played far greater than they have on the road. A Mets team that's well below 500 on the road, 11 games below 500 on the road or so to be exact. And now we look at how this is going to fare between the pitching matchups. I think we're all very excited for the starting pitching matchup tonight, but it's going to come down to who has the better offense. Whose offense decides to not only break out, but stay breaking out. Because the Mets have literally the most they have the worst numbers in all baseball over the past calendar week. Really, since the month of September began, there's no team that's been worse offensively than the New York Mets. And this comes after having their best offensive month of their entire franchise's existence. And the month of August, Eric Chavez had a lot of things to be hyped up about for a 4-week span, 3-4 week span. But in the course of the 162 entirely, this Mets team has continued to underwhelm, has continued to underperform. Let's see if they can change that narrative or if we're going to get more of the same nonsense tonight here between the Mets now and the Rangers. Let's get to some comments here, everybody, and then we'll get into talking about these laps a bit more. Nick says, I still have faith the Mets turn around. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you guys. If I was lying to you guys right now, then I would be saying that, I have the utmost faith in this Mets team too. I don't. It's impossible for me to. As someone who's watched every single game and has covered every single game this season, I can tell you wholeheartedly, it is really hard to get most of the fans on board to buy in this year still. But the year's not over. They're still in a playoff position. And for all those reasons, we have to stay locked in at least to varying degrees. And I know I'm going to be locked in, win, lose, or draw. So I just hope that this Mets team can go out and finally give us something to be excited about, be happy about, and maybe, just maybe, prove us wrong for once, for the first time in 3+ months, that this team could actually find some semblance of consistency. Hard to imagine that they do that with just 2 weeks to spare this season, but maybe knowing that they're finally closer to outside of playoffs than making playoffs right now, that maybe this will finally be the fire that they need under their ass. When you look at teams, as I mentioned earlier, and I'll say it again, in the Reds and the Giants, and then to lesser degrees, the Diamondbacks and the Cardinals, all nipping at the heels for that third and final wildcard spot. So that is what we have going there on the wildcard. Thank you so much again for that donation. I appreciate that. Let's get back to the main slide. This was our post-game slide from yesterday. I naturally click on that because I haven't done pregame for a hot minute here, and that's why you guys gave a jump scare for a hot second. So that's all on me. I apologize for the intro running there. Hit that like and subscribe on your way, and everybody, as we get on to breaking down everything that you need to know ahead of tonight's matchup. Just make playoffs and anything can happen. Oh, of course, but easier said than done for a Mets team right now that looks like that they'll be lucky to make playoffs at this rate. They, again, have had the 4th worst record in baseball for the past 3 months. They've had a longer span of time this season being a bottom feeder baseball club than they have been a team that was 21 games above 500. Caleb with the $10 holla. Thank you so much, my guy. I appreciate that. Caleb says, I got an odd feeling he will have his best game of the year and or throw no-hitter. It feels wired. I miss him and probably will cry when he goes outside. Sadly, my GF is a Philly fan. Thank God she's hot. Well, I'm glad she's hot for you, Caleb, because if she wasn't hot, if she didn't have a valid reason as to why you should be with her, outside of the obvious one on the attraction, I'd say you got to drop her right away. If it makes you feel any better, actually, this might make you feel worse. My girl was initially a Phillies fan as well, but we quickly converted her into Mets fandom because that's the kind of magic that Wardy provides. Caleb, you're not providing that magic yet, and I get it that she must be a diehard true and true Philly fan, but you got more work to do there. Just can't do anything about it this year because there's nothing that's going to sway your girlfriend from wanting to leave Philly fandom when the Phillies are far more suited to go on a deep run this year as things currently stand over the Mets. No doubt about it. As we speak, though, obviously, on 5:45 p.m. Eastern, September 12th, 2025. Thank you so much for that donation, though. I appreciate that. Let's see. Jacob deGrom, the greatest of our... Oh, Jacob was amazing. I have them right here. I have his 2018 Cy Young bobblehead. I also have his... Which one's this? Is this 2017, 2018, or was he... This has to be 2019. 2019, Cy Young. 2018, Cy Young. Crazy. The worst part about just looking back on deGrom's tenure with the Mets has so much more to do with the fact that this is a guy who gave so much to this team in a time where they gave so little back. You know, it really frustrates me just thinking about the amount of just magical performances that he provided for this club, and they gave him no run support. So bad that he felt inclined to become one of the best hitters in the Mets lineup with runners in scoring position beginning the 2021 season before the universal DH. He was doing everything himself. He was our Texas version, or Florida version rather, of Ohtani. Like, that's really what he became for us. And it's just a shame that even with how things ended with his tenure, and there was some sourness initially in the sense of the Mets wanted to have another say in bringing deGrom back, yet it didn't happen. And the reason why it didn't happen was because Jake supposedly did not give the Mets the final say. From all the reporting that I remember, clearly going back to covering these sweepstakes, and I'm going to show you guys something right now that's going to be kind of crazy. And it's going to just show you that I do know a thing or two about what I'm talking about at times. And here's why. All right, so best way for me to show this. Let's see, how can I do this? All right. I can't show his contact, so I got to cover it. Take a look at this with me, everybody, okay? Just take a look at this. Look at that date. December 2nd, 2022. deGrom to Texas, 585. I want you to look at the timestamp of 7/21. You see that? 7/21 on December 2nd, 2022. 7:21 p.m. And I want you to pay attention to that time, okay? There's a reason why I want you to pay attention to that time. Here's Jeff Passan breaking the news. What's the time say on Passan's tweet? Oh, yeah, 8:02 p.m., December 2nd, 2022. The reason why I bring this up is because people doubt me when I do mention things every now and then. I don't get intel every single time, but I do get relayed things every single offseason. And this is one of the biggest scoops that was ever relayed to me, that I was not allowed to break publicly myself as much as I wanted to, because I would have hurt my connection at the time. This is from the exact same person who relayed me the information. The same exact person who gave Jeff Passan this scoop is the same exact person who relayed it to me north of an hour sooner. And I can't expand as to why that is, but the point I'm trying to make is, when that news initially happened, I had to sit there, patiently wait, without telling anyone a word, that Jake wasn't returning. And it drives me nuts when moments like that happen, because Jake had such a significant impact on my life as a Mets fan, especially as one who really started to get locked in that 2015 season. I know that many of you guys feel very similar as younger Mets fans. If you're more veteran fans, then different discussion. But Jake has been my guy since the start. The first ever authentic Mets jersey I received that wasn't David Wright was Jacob deGrom. My brother got Syndergaard and I got deGrom for Christmas, and I believe that was Christmas of 2016 or so, 2015, 2016 range, so right around Jake's beginning of his career. And there were so many highs I had, and my biggest takeaway from deGrom leaving the Rangers in that moment, when I couldn't, leaving the Mets in that moment, I couldn't speak on it, was overwhelmed with emotion, and just having to wait and sweat it out and get to the point of waiting for that to become public. I made the thumbnail, I had everything prepped for what we were doing, and for when that officially did get announced and it was reaffirmed, the information that had been relayed was accurate, it really took me back because, there was a great part of me that felt that Jake was going to return to this Mets team, while there was also a part of me that felt it was not going to happen. These were the reasons why. That's why I talked about it in our video that offseason on 5 Mets who won't return, the content that I do every single offseason on players that won't return to the organization. And I had Jake on the thumbnail because I didn't want him to leave, but you knew it was a possibility. And it really stung. It stung then. It still stings now because even though Jake is more of a 5 and dive pitcher this year, because it's true, Jake is giving more 5-6 innings sample size outings than anything else that we've seen this year to keep him healthy. But even those 5-6 innings, you're still getting more of Jake. You're getting a guy touching 99, sometimes 100 on the gun. You're getting a slider, high 80s, low 90s, disgusting. And you're getting a man on the mound that knows how to have pinpoint accuracy probably better than anyone else in the game right now, even at his young age of 37. So when I look back on Jacob deGrom and everything that he brought to this Mets team, let's just take a moment to reflect for a second because his greatness should not be understated. What Jake did with the Mets will never be replicated, more than likely ever in his career when looking at his pure numbers, and that's why I think we should really appreciate it. His final season with the Mets, injury-riddled and all in 2022 in 64 innings, was a 14.27 K per nine to a 1 walks per nine. A home run per nine of a 1.26, much greater than previous years, but still elite. A 3-year ERA with a 2.2 expected ERA and a just over 2 FIP. In 2021, 92 innings for Jacob deGrom, 14 innings, 1 walk per nine, just a 14 K per nine, a 1 walk per nine, just insane. A 1 ERA with a 1.5 expected ERA in 2021 in 92 innings. If Jake stayed healthy that season, he more than likely wins Cy Young rather comfortably. 2020, 68 innings. The only reason why Jake didn't win it this year is because Trevor Bauer and his cheating spin rate with the sticky stuff bested him. 13.7 K per nine to 2 walks per nine, a sub 1 home run per nine, a 2.38 ERA, a 2.7 expected ERA. 2019 Jacob deGrom, 204 innings pitched back when he was healthy and dominant. 11 strikeouts per nine, a sub 2 walks per nine, a sub 1 home run per nine, a 2.4 ERA, a 2.7 expected ERA. 2018, again, these are the Cy Young years of Jacob deGrom, 217 innings, 11 K per nine, 1.9 walks per nine, a 0.4 home run per nine, just simply unfathomable. A 1.7 ERA and a 2.44 expected ERA. Go back further, you're getting more and more great outings, great seasons from Jacob deGrom. And he was a late bloomer for this Mets team as well, something that can't be forgotten. Jake was not initially drafted as a pitcher. He was drafted as initially a shortstop that we saw at Stetson. And he was someone who came in and properly developed as a pitcher and became this late high riser where he was really good when he first broke out on the scene that we saw. Very good, as a matter of fact, in his first couple seasons. However, when you looked at his velocity and you looked at his stuff, you knew that he wasn't necessarily blowing the doors off you velocity-wise. He wasn't necessarily looking like the most elite starter. He just looked like a really, really good 2 or a 3 in a rotation. Well, he made that jump as we then entered the 2018 season to really go from, I shouldn't even say 2018, it really started more in 2017, even though his ERA won't say it with a 3.5 ERA, but that's when we finally started to see more of the dominance that a guy like Jake could bring when looking at his K to walk ratio. And he carried that into the 2017 season, from 2017 to 2018 rather, where he then again had his career best season with a 1.7 ERA. That season alone is what completely changed the narrative and continued to change the narrative on win-loss record, because he had a 10-win to 9-loss record in 2018. He was 11-8 in 2019. And if it wasn't for Jake, we would probably still be in a system today where we did take into greater account wins and losses and all those little factors. But for all the frustration that came with Jacob deGrom leaving this organization, I will just say this: I don't really have any qualms with him. I thoroughly enjoyed his time as a Met. I miss him dearly. That's why I appreciate guys like Noah McLean so much right now, because he's giving me flashes of what could be in regards to exciting, dominant aces on the mound for years to come, because he's only 24. The same applies with Jonathan right now at 22. The same applies with Brandon Sproat at 24, turning 25, Brandon, in, I believe, 5 days. So happy early birthday to Mr. Sproat. Definitely exciting to see what the young Mets have, not only now, but moving forward for this club. But to think about everything that Jacob deGrom brought to this Mets team, he gave them status in times that it wasn't warranted, that there should be no attention, no positive attention brought to the organization. Yeah, he brought that. Now, I say that both up and down, because he also brought the LOL Mets narrative continued, because the Mets couldn't score every time he was on the mound, and that was a problem. And he also was so injury plagued in his second half of his tenure with the Mets that it really did sour things greater than what they otherwise should have been, because we were all tired of seeing our ace down on the count in spring training before the season even began. But what we come to learn is that since deGrom has left the organization, the Mets have had that exact same issue. They have not won a single season under the Steve Cohen era in which their ace caliber starter, for the most part, hasn't been injured to begin the season. Every single one of them, for the most part, has been injured. Kodai Senga was a bit of an exception entering this year, but as we've seen since he went down with his injury in early June, he has not been the same guy and is now towing the rubber tonight, but this time for AAA Syracuse. So, final thing I'll say on Jake, and then we're going to get into actually breaking down these lineups and previewing a bit more about this matchup, is that say what you will about all the negativity and how things soured with deGrom, but also appreciate all the good that he brought to the organization. Because tonight can go one of two ways, I think. It's either going to go this way, which is he's going to dominate. He's going to go at least 7 scoreless against this Mets team. Or the Mets get him out of the ball game. 4.5, 5 innings. They wake up at home at Citi Field. They pounce, because while they haven't seen Jake in a couple years, they know how to attack Jake, and they take advantage of that. And they don't scoff at the notion of hitting Jake, but they rather thrive in the process of doing it. I hope it's the latter. I'm not expecting to be the latter, but I really do hope that is the case. And what I'm also anticipating to be a great pitching duel, all things considered, between the young Jonathan and the veteran, oh so dominant, Jacob deGrom. But now let's get on to the lineups today, everybody. And let's begin here with the Texas Rangers. And the Texas Rangers today and their lineup, a team that, as I mentioned, is 10 games above 500 that we've seen over the past 3 months. And when we take a current look at where they stand right now in the playoffs out of the American League, it currently consists of the following, everybody. Their playoff standing as of now is 2 games behind in the AL West. And as we take a look at the wild card as a whole right there for them in the American League, they currently are, as we speak, again, 2 games out of the wild card. So they're still well within reach. And just like how the Mets are not even 2 games up in the wild card, the Rangers are going to be heavily aggressive in this series to continue to push for that postseason spot. Now, to begin here with this Rangers offense, let's get into it, and let's start here with the following. We have Mr. Smith and leadoff at shortstop for them. What is 708 OPS? As we know, they are without Corey Seager, as he sadly went down yet again with injury. Wyatt Langford there with his just under 800 OPS commands left field. You got Jock Peterson, who is a guy that many Mets fans, including myself, have wanted for a while because he's torched the Mets many times. Will be interesting to see how Jock goes up against Tong today. That could be a circumstance where we see Peterson hit a bomb. Not that I wish it, but Jock Peterson has thrived at Citi Field many times, including his tenure with the San Francisco Giants. 608 OPS at DH. Jake Berger, who's had success during his time in Miami against us, a little bit with the White Sox. 729 OPS at first base. Mr. Jean at third base with his sub 700 OPS. Ozuna, a different Ozuna than maybe the one you're used to, this time with an S of 544 OPS in right field. Jonah Heim, who I'm actually quite a big fan of. It's just unfortunate that Heim just has not been that same batter the past, really since they've won the World Series. Heim has not been that guy, and it's unfortunate because I like Jonah Heim quite a bit. 608 OPS at catcher. Freeman at second base, 557 OPS. And then we have Hellman in center field, 928 OPS. deGrom toes the rubber, as we mentioned, who's been looking fantastic for pretty much all season long. And now as we take a look at the Mets lineup, it consists as follows. Lindor in leadoff, coming off of what was another brutal stretch of baseball for Lindor. He's been horrendous on the road this year, and that needs to change yesterday. 788 OPS at short. Juan Soto, who has been the best batter in baseball for the past 2 months, feels like at least. 928 OPS in right field. Alonso, 855 OPS first base. I will be shocked if Alonso does anything good today. I hope I'm proven wrong, but I think Jake is going to have his number terribly, but I hope I'm proven wrong. Nimmo, batting fourth today, 767 OPS in left field. Nimmo had the dramatics in 2022 with the greatest catch of a home run rob off of Justin Turner that you'll ever see for Jacob deGrom in center. Can Nimmo have a flair for the dramatic offensively and or defensively against his former friend, now foe? I guess we'll have to wait and see. Mark Vientos at DH, 735 OPS. Mark has had a big hit what feels like every single game since pretty much the beginning of August. Can he continue that hot trend tonight against the dominant Jacob deGrom? Really excited to see how that matchup is going to go, actually. McNeil batting sixth with just under 800 OPS facing his former friend. That's a matchup that I actually like for Jeff, too. I think Jeff can have quality at-bats against Jake tonight, all things considered. Brett Beatty, who should have been starting yesterday, wasn't. Back in the lineup today. Brett, like Mark, has had a flair for the dramatic as of late. Has had some clutch hits for the Mets. Let's see if he can continue that. Alvarez, I'm expecting to look underwhelming, to say the least. Alvarez has really not provided much of anything since returning from his injuries, as he's playing through injuries that he will need to get surgery on at the end of the season. Luis Torrens is making strides to return this Mets team, so that's great and all, but it isn't happening yet. And in the meantime, Alvarez against deGrom, yeah, we'll see how that goes. Cedric Mullins, who has looked horrendous against right-handed pitching this year, was sat yesterday against Jesus Luzardo when he's at 831 OPS against lefties, and was brought in direct hand because of his dominance against lefties as a reverse splits batter. But Carlos Mendoza said, you know what? Let's sit Cedric Mullins in a matchup that made most sense for him a day ago. And let's bring him in ice cold, who doesn't have a hit in forever against, or he had a hit in the ninth inning a couple days ago, but who cares, against Jacob deGrom. Yeah, surely that's going to bode well. I'll have to see it to believe it. Jonathan, towing the rubber, as we mentioned, looked fantastic in his first start. Second start, honestly, I thought it was impressive how he handled the adversity. He gives up 3 home runs, and he still gives us 6 innings of quality. You know, Sean Manaea can't do that right now. Clay Holmes can't do that right now. David Peterson can't do that right now. It's been impressive to see that even while facing adversity, how well Atan was able to stay composed and stay in the ball game and keep the Mets in the ball game, as a matter of fact. So when we take a look at the Texas Rangers right now, 77-70 on the season. Yes, folks, you heard that correctly. The Mets currently have a worse record than the Texas Rangers. The Mets are just 5 games above 500 to the Texas Rangers, who looked like for a while that they were a team that wasn't even going to sniff playoffs potentially. Now 7 games up and having a chance to make it 8 games up on the Mets tonight. deGrom has 169 strikeouts this season, and when we take a look at his baseball savant numbers this year, they are exactly what you thought that they would be, unfortunately. As much as I'm not happy to say it, they are as advertised. As you guys can take a look along with me right here, right now. Let me just pull this up quick. That's not what I meant to do. Put that down there. Almost. There we go. Here's deGrom's savant page. Like I said, pains me to look at. I'm not happy to look at this, but this is what happens. You know, this is the risk the Mets took in letting Jake go, and it's more so on Jake not really letting the Mets get the final say, even though the Mets never loved the idea of going north of $200 million for him, and I don't blame them for that, even in the Epler regime at the time of that happening. I really don't. Jake, as you guys can see, has been utterly dominant this season. Forcing fastballs sitting right around 98 miles per hour that he's throwing 46% of the time. and that's in the 93rd percentile in fastball velocity. The slider at 38% of the time is sitting right around 90, disgusting. The changeup that he throws 11% of the time, sitting right around 89, 90 miles per hour. And the curveball at just 5% of the arsenal, because we always know he's had one of the greater curveballs in baseball that he just keeps in his back pocket for whenever he feels like he needs it, because he doesn't have his other stuff working. That doesn't happen too often, and that's in the right around 81 miles per hour is where he's been sitting there. So yes, Jake continues to be deGrominant, as we would love to say during his time with the Mets, but he's not a New York Met anymore. So I'm not going to sit here and talk about how much, I hope Jacob deGrom dominates tonight, as I much rather hope and sit and break down with each and every one of you how much I hope and see this Mets team beat up on Jacob deGrom today. And kind of feels silly trying to make that statement, I will say, just because of the way that this team has not been playing well for a good stretch of time now. And again, things can change. I'm not going to sit here and say that they can't or that they stand no chance tonight, because none of those things are true. The Mets already are in greater standing of winning tonight, knowing that they're home. Just the fact that they're home alone is why I have somewhat of an instilled confidence that they will at least keep this an entertaining ball game. I will not be doing a watch party live stream today, but I will be live post-game directly after the game like we typically do. I didn't get a chance to do the watch party today, which is why we are doing the pregame and the postgame instead. So that way you guys still get your two forms of content today. Like my optimism? Yeah, I mean, listen, the Mets are at home. That's a positive. The Mets on Friday nights haven't been good. That's definitely true as well. But what's also true is that the Mets are in put up or shut up time. I don't know how many times I need to keep saying this, but I'll say it again. The Mets have literally nothing to lose at this point. The only thing that they have to lose now is their playoff standing and the entirety of the season. And it looked like nothing short of an absolute failure for a team that had not only playoff expectations, but World Series expectations heading into this season. How do they go about a 3-game series against what has been a very good Texas Rangers team as of late? You have to chip away. You can't roll over early, and you have to play until the final out. This Mets team, in dozens upon dozens upon dozens of games this year, has not played to the final out, and that has certainly been one of their demises. What's your preferred lineup if you were to make one for today? Good question, Heck, and I'll give you an answer right now. So we see Cedric in there, and first of all, Jose Siri against him sounds like a terrible matchup. I feel like Jose Siri would strike out 4 times against Jacob deGrom. But I also don't see how Cedric Mullins is going to benefit, even if he gets some hanging pitches by Jake, because I think he's going to be overwhelmed. I think Jose Siri still maybe would have been a greater option, because Siri is the kind of guy that can run into one if Jake sits 96, 98, 99-ish, and really does go more middle, because maybe he misses. We know Jake misses, just like any other pitcher. It happens. And Siri is a guy that I have instilled confidence of to bring that into the gap or to hit that out of the ballpark far greater than I am Mullins. I know that might seem silly when you look at their respective stats this year, but when you understand the context of how feeble Mullins has been since arriving as a Met batter versus Siri and how very feast or famine he is, I like the idea of feast or famine more, because we know at absolute worst, Siri just won't provide anything. He'll strike out a bunch. But at most, he can provide power that Mullins has shown literally zero of since arriving as a New York Met. I believe Cedric Mullins and Jose Siri had the same amount of extra base hits, and mind you, Siri's only played 11 games or so this year. In comparison to Cedric, since he's landed with the Mets, it has not been good at all. So that is one thing that I would bear in mind. I would also bear in mind how we would go about this entire lineup configuration 1 through 6 here, because Nimmo batting 4th, Vientos batting 5th. I don't hate it, but I don't love it either. And this is kind of one of those lineups where I don't know how much the Mets benefit actually by having Alonso batting 3rd, because Alonso has been very fickle with his bat. He's been good in runners in scoring position, no doubt, but he's been fickle. And because he's been fickle is why I don't necessarily love the idea of having him at 3rd, a guaranteed first inning at bat, if he's going to roll over and look not good today the way that I fear. I kind of like Alonso batting 4th today better, and then having Nimmo either higher up in the lineup or going about a different type of configuration. I like the fact that Marte's not in the lineup today, even though he had 2 hits yesterday. I don't care. This is not a favorable matchup at all for Marte, nor is this a favorable matchup for Vientos today. But when you consider the options off this Mets bench currently, I really don't think that there's anyone that's a more feasible option than the current players that they have out there today. Mauricio most certainly isn't. Siri, we just made we advocated for and talked about the pros and cons with considering someone like him. Hayden Senger's your other catching option, but we're not going to lose sleep over Hayden Senger not starting today. The Mets don't really have a lot that they can offer as a proper alternative off the bench right now. So there isn't too much that I would actually change about today's lineup. I'm more bothered from yesterday's lineup on not playing Beatty, even in lefty-lefty matchup, and most certainly Cedric Mullins in a lefty-lefty matchup in which it made sense to do so. Let's see that. Wardy, would you still have done the deal if you knew that Tommy John was happening? If I knew that he was getting Tommy John, then no, not at all. Like, if I was the Mets and say they were just about to ink deGrom back, and then we find out that, he's going to need Tommy John surgery again. No, I wouldn't invest in him. That's why it's a bittersweet thing when talking about Jake and watching Jake tonight, because it made sense as to why his tenure in the organization came to an end. There was a lot of turmoil in those final years there under previous regimes and the new regimes. And, also just a guy who hadn't been around the club nearly as much because he'd been so injury plagued. But it's still Jacob deGrom. It's one of those things where, yes, he might be injured, but it feels like every other season. But when he's out there, oh my God, is he a human highlight reel? All you want to do is just kind of like smirk and laugh, because Jacob deGrom provided a confidence at his core in this rotation for us fans that I have yet to experience with any other pitcher. He instilled a confidence in me that Noah Syndergaard couldn't instill consistently. Matt Harvey couldn't instill consistently. Wheels towards the end of his tenure here couldn't instill consistently. For how long I've been a Mets fan, no one has even gotten close to giving me the confidence level of knowing that he's going to go out there and dominate the way that Jake will every fourth or fifth day. And that's why I said, especially in his 2021 and 2022 seasons when covering him on the platform, how much every single fan needs to appreciate what they are witnessing. Because this is not going to last forever, just like everything else in life. But this too shall pass, and it will reach an end at some point. And that's why you have to appreciate this greatness for what it is what he was doing in that beginning of the 2021 season were things that no other starter outside of Bob Gibson have done in Major League Baseball history. So it's a shame that he got as injured as he did that year. He let it all out on the field, that we know. But Jake, when right, is undoubtedly the most dominant pitcher on the planet. He still is that, even if he's more of a 5-and-dive starter instead of a true 7-8 inning guy every time out there, as the times have changed whether we like it or not. And he's always injured, so it makes sense that you're not going to move the needle too much with him on trying to get as much length out of him if he's as injury prone as he's been. Many needs to go. Players have tuned him out, not a leader. I mean, we'll know come the offseason if the players have tuned him out, because the only way to really suggest that is if the Mets do go the lengths of parting ways with him that soon this offseason. Then that tells you more of what you need to know. But I don't believe that to be the case. That's like what Judge is doing now. Yep. And I don't appreciate it enough as a baseball fan, and that's mainly just because he's a New York Yankee. I hate the Yankees with a passion, so it's really hard for me to appreciate watching Yankee baseball, and I'm not trying to offend my awesome Yankee fan followers that are just awesome people here, regardless of having rival fandom. I just can't muster watching Yankee baseball without being bothered. Like, I don't know how else to explain it. I don't enjoy watching Yankee baseball. I've never enjoyed watching Yankee baseball. So it's really hard for me to appreciate a guy having absurd and continued success while in that pinstripe. So that's kind of how I feel with Judge. He was absolutely the best hitter of our generation right now, you could argue. And he's a guy that definitely I think fans will have taken for granted once he is gone. But for me personally, it's a little harder to appreciate just because of what exact team he's on. I don't do a good job on ignoring the team and focusing on solely the player when it's a status of a guy like Judge. It's very hard for me to. It's been easier for me to actually do with a guy like Harper because Bryce was a pompous little prick during his time with the Washington Nationals from the fan point of view, in my humble opinion, because he had the cockiness, he had the swagger, but he really just had kind of that cocky prep boyness that you didn't love to necessarily see from a player, especially as a rival team in the Mets. But once he got to the Phillies and kind of became, in a way, a little bit more raggedy and, more blue collar and more America, especially with the great moments that he's helped when it comes to Team USA and stuff. That's where I really feel like I started to appreciate Harper more for his own personality and as a player, regardless of the uniform he's in. Oddly enough, as bizarre as it sounds, because I despise the Phillies more than any other team on the planet, yet I feel like I can muster watching Bryce a little bit more, and I think it may more so have to do with the fact of the way that he's repped Team USA, probably, which is why maybe I will have a changing of heart with Aaron Judge, because Judge is already committed to Team USA for the 2026 World Baseball Classic. So we didn't really get a chance to see him, do all that much for this team in the past. I feel like Harper's had his moments, Trey's had his moments, Judge not so much. So that's how I feel about that, but I'm not opposed to my current mentality changing on that front either. I'm not trying to be stubborn there. Well said on Harper. I know, I feel like I'm not the only one. I feel like a good contingent of Mets fans do not despise Harper nearly as much as they used to. And granted, I think goes in hand with his injury-plagued past couple seasons and not being that completely dominant batter that he once was, but still, he's still a very good player and a guy that, we've loved to hate for many years. And thank you guys in the kind words regarding the Jacob deGrom stuff. Yeah, going back to why I relayed that earlier, it's not an opportunity that I really get to show off that often, and I just kind of want to reaffirm the fact that we're out here, we definitely are tapped in, we're connected, and I knew about Jacob deGrom signing with the Texas Rangers before Jeff Passan went with it publicly 40 minutes prior. Just the thought of knowing if I wanted to send out the post to breaking news, Jake is heading to the Rangers, or if I did a video, a live stream on my own, breaking the news myself, would have done absurd numbers, yes, but it would have been disingenuous. It would have been wrong on various aspects. I would have lost my connection. I would have hurt a relationship with someone that, I have, a good deal of respect for and appreciate in the industry. And that was a great example of just, again, knowing your place, knowing your role. And that's what I've tried to relay a lot to you guys on what I've learned in the industry since going from not only just being a fan to being a talking head to now being someone who, is not, a true media member, but is most certainly someone who is tapped into a degree like anyone else that has their connections inside the game. And knowing that a lot of these people receive scoops, significant intel, but they're not the people to break it because it's not their place to break it, because maybe they don't pay to break it the way that there are most certainly people in today's industry that will pay to get that scoop. There's a great reality where Passan paid to get that scoop. I'm not saying he for certain did. All I'm saying is that isn't most certainly a thing that happens. People will pay to get the information, be the first to break it, and it makes sense for a guy like Jeff to break it because he's the face of MLB Insider Reporting out of ESPN. I am not an insider, and if I went out of my way to break that news, it would have only hurt things moving forward, because while I had that on my resume, it would have been a one-off, because then I would have lost my connection. Then any other person I want to consider maybe relaying me information maybe would not have given it going forward because I had burned a previous bridge. So I know I'm getting on a little bit of a tangent, but this is just something that I've been wanting to voice a while regarding the deGrom stuff, because people doubted me a lot when I said that I knew about Jake before anything went public about it by a good stretch of time. The same way that I knew about Carl. You know what? F it. Hold on, my bad. I was trying to show you guys, I have my text from when Carlos Correa flew to Minneapolis the night before he officially signed with the Twins and went back to Minnie. However, I'm not going to show it because that was in a group chat with multiple people's names I won't be able to hide, and you guys don't need to know who those people are, so I'm not going to. But I think you guys can believe me if you believe what I just showed you, because I literally showed you the text, the timestamp, and everything, and it wasn't a screenshot, so you guys know I'm not bluffing. Unhinged Pat, love you, buddy. Soto puts both lips on the water fountain spout. Patrick Hennessy, everybody. Pat. Your name's Unhinged Pat. Pat, you tend to be unhinged everywhere, Pat. You even tend to be unhinged celebrating things for other people. Fairly recently, Pat. You know. Jeremy with the $5 holla. Thank you so much. Harper has grown into a true professional. I can agree. He's still whiny, but he's not as whiny. How much do you blame Lindor? He's supposed to be the leader and captain of this team, and we have no clubhouse identity. Lindor is my favorite. Yeah, no, it's fair. It's fair. Listen. It comes down to performance, right? And Lindor has not performed like the leader that he's supposed to be. Now, I completely understand that in the case of Lindor, he's not going to be able to single-handedly carry this team on a nightly basis. And I know that what he did last year was magical in more ways than one, and we can't take that for granted. Having said that, Lindor this season has just been night and day not the same player at home versus on the road. And we first made note of this going back like 2.5 months ago, and it was like, okay, a good sample size of the season, but the year isn't over. Still got like 2-3 months left to try to right this ship and get things figured out. But unfortunately, Lindor has done nothing of that. He has not fixed his road play at all. He has not made the proper in-game adjustments. And say what you will about his leadership, I don't know how that voice is in the clubhouse. Your guess is as good as mine. We saw Ken Rosenthal come out with an article for The Athletic today that highlighted how it feels like there's something off with this Mets team and their core between Lindor, Nimmo, Soto, Alonso, but, doesn't necessarily know what. And we've all kind of felt the same this year. And that's why it'll be very interesting to see what the Mets may do when it comes to breaking up this core if they continue to free fall the way that they have for the past ensuing 3 months now. Jeremy, thank you for the donation. I really do appreciate that. To answer your question, no, point blank, how much do you blame Lindor? I put a level of blame on Francisco, but for the level of blame I put on Francisco, it only goes so far. He's still having by all accounts a rock solid season for this Mets team. While it's not his best season, it's not really his worst either, and he just has not brought the vibes or maybe the aura like what we saw in the last couple seasons. It doesn't have that same feel. Lindor, Francisco at times gives me more of a vibe this season of similarity to how he was in 2022, where, he was a very good player for the Mets, but he was just kind of starting to, become more the face of the team. He hadn't, fully established himself. It feels more of that this season with him, and the 2025 season, feels more of an anomaly in the sense of how he was just able to go on an MVP run as long as he did. But then I go back to saying to myself, well, he also kind of had a good stretch of playing MVP kind of ball in 2022 as well. So that isn't completely accurate and fair point. But Lindor's definitely been an interesting one to navigate this year because there have clearly been flaws with this Mets core group. James says, I have enjoyed this season for the most part. There have been moments of brilliance, but this team this year just doesn't have what it is to do anything meaningful in the playoffs. I can't say I've enjoyed this season, unfortunately. I wish I have, James. I really do, but I have not. I have not enjoyed this season at all. It's been rather dreadful, if I'm being frank, to cover on a nightly basis. It has really been miserable. My entire summer has been a wash of the Mets playing, let's call it, dog shit baseball. And that has really not been something that I've appreciated, not only as a fan, but as someone who covers this team for a living. It really weighs on me, on my mental health, on my physical health, because I spend so much time behind this computer. The only way I think I can enjoy this season at this point is if the Mets rewrite the ship, play great baseball that they haven't played in months, and have themselves a deep playoff run. Otherwise, this year will be nothing short of a disappointment for me and for the minds of many that are watching this live in a replay right now. But that is all I got for you, everybody. I'm going to let you go now. We are going to wrap it up because I got to get everything set for our post-game show. I got to handle some things in between as well. But I want to thank you guys all so much for chiming in for our Mets pregame show today as the Mets hope to best Jacob deGrom somehow, some way at Citi Field as Jake toes the rubber in Citi for the first time since October of 2025. Crazy that it's been 3 years. That's how much time can fly just like that. And now let's see if the Mets finally, somehow, some way, can get themselves right with the final 2 weeks left to go this season. Thank you guys again so much for watching. I'll see you all again for a post-game show later on. Until then, have a fantastic rest of your night, day, evening, whenever you guys are watching this. And as always, no matter what, let's go Mets, everybody.